Welcome. This is the first in a series of interviews I'm going to be doing the next 8 weeks. This is the first interview in a series I've called RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay. I will be joined by people who either are in recovery like me or drink socially but choose to be sober when they play. Tonight I have, look at my notes, ChiefDaddyMaster of Instagram joining me. I haven't seen him come online just yet. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this is, as someone in recovery, doing sober stuff can be difficult. And I think it's a good subject to sit and talk about, to find out what works best and what experience someone else might have on this subject. So I'm hoping that someone will get something out of it. It's something I thought about doing for a while. So I'm just hoping that people will watch and listen and hopefully find it interesting. Let me see. He's not on yet. Just wait a little bit. I did say I would talk a little bit at the start. A little bit about me is I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery coming up to 3 years this September. So I'm completely no drugs, no alcohol, no pubbers either. Which, when you've gotten used to doing sex with stimulants, can be very, very difficult to do without. So this is kind of my way of maybe just hoping to show people that it is possible to have a sober life. And actually enjoy fetish still. So a little bit about my story is 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, because I've had a couple of relapses whilst in recovery. I had complete and utter breakdown from it, from the drug taking, and I needed to change something, and that was back in 2016. And now I'm gotten to a point where I want to enjoy my fetish, but there's still a lot of things I have to relearn, boundaries I have to keep, and that's just a simple fact to keep myself safe. So it's a bit of a journey, it's a bit of trial and error, but I'm definitely starting to enjoy my fetish life more. I'm a lot more happy than I used to be. So, see, is he online yet? No, he's not there yet. So I've invited a couple of different people next coming weeks. Hopefully I can get it to be at the same time as now in the next 8 weeks, but with different time zones and locations, some of them might change a little bit from time to time. So let me just see where my guest is. There he is. Let me just connect to ChiefDaddyMaster from the States.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I just got your invite to this after you sent your Facebook message.
Fair enough, fair enough. I couldn't see you on the online list. I've just kind of done an introduction to what these interviews are for. I could just see a cattail there.
Yes, it is a very loyal sub. I just moved from 3 chairs trying to get her out of the way, and she's insistent.
Well, it gives a little bit more interesting viewing. I'm sure, getting a pussy on camera.
Yes, indeed.
So I've just been telling a little bit about the people watching what this is about. It's more like, for my background story, it's about me being sober, and sober sex can be sometimes very difficult. Just to start with, what do you prefer to be called, like name, pronouns, or titles?
I'm him, his. People can call me Daddy.
Daddy. We'll stick with that then. That's easy to remember. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm originally from New York City. My leather journey began in the 70s, in the heyday. I went to the Ramrod on West Street, just off of Christopher. My first encounter with leather was walking into that bar and ordering a drink and having this gorgeous guy in uniform show up and say, "This is your first time in a bar, isn't it?" And as I said, "No," and shook the scotch out of my glass, he said, "Come with me." Well, went with him and his boy, who was trying to stab me with his eyes. And he took me to another bar. We said, "You will be safer here." And that was my first encounter. I was like, "I think I'd be safer in your apartment, sir," but that wasn't going to happen. A few years later, when I entered university, I discovered the mine shaft and went from there. Roommate just came in. And I have been on my leather journey ever since then. Through New York, through that horrible time at the beginning of AIDS, an underground leather community in Israel, which is now thriving, as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself, I had in my younger days have had experiences of playing in a non-sober environment and did not like that. And I actually come from a background of addiction.
Right.
So,
it actually comes to my next question, which is a question I will ask in every interview. Completely sober, clear-headed, or a social drinker? And I know, in fact, you're a social drinker, but you play sober.
Correct.
Yeah.
As a sir, I take it very seriously of my job to read the signs.
Mm.
And subspace is enough of a sign to read with an individual, especially a new individual, when you're at MAL or something like that, much less to try to have to consider the effects of alcohol and drugs and how they'll play with that individual, especially when you're flogging somebody, you're single-tailing somebody, you're fisting somebody. I need to have those reactions. I need to know that I can read that person I may be taking them too far.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that really came into clarity for me this MAL, where several people passed because of their mixing of Viagra and other drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Along with a friend of mine who I think he's now sick. He's about a year sober, who told me, that he was on crystal meth specifically so he could be fisted.
Mm.
And I really said, have you ever tried to work with somebody to properly train your hole to see if you can or you cannot take this? There are things that I hope that I'm not going to ruin it for everybody, but I love porn too. I love the porn stories as well. But
Yeah.
then there's the reality. And a perfect thing happened with my slave, who's a little older. Oh, sir, I want to sleep on the dog bed. Well, one night I did have him sleep on the dog bed. The next day, several a leave and a chiropractic visit fixed that. So, I'm all there for the fantasy because that's part of what
the
attracts
biggest
us. But you
biggest sort
have
of
to mix the
erogenous
fantasy
thing
truly
is the
with the
brain.
reality. And if you've been trained properly and whatnot, and the fist is not fitting into your ass, maybe as much as you like that isn't the thing. Maybe your body's trying to tell you something.
Mm. Yeah, it's actually the fourth question, and that will just kind of set us off on what we can sit and talk about. Is what is clear play to you? Which you've already kind of branched a little bit into, and why is it important? Which you've also talked a little bit about. Coming from, like you mentioned about your friend who couldn't be fisted without crystal meth. It's a very much echoes with me. I've been fisted. I've never really enjoyed it, even on drugs, but I've done it. But I've only done it whilst high. I'm not adverse to the idea, but I've never been able to enjoy it. I've never done it with the right person.
Mm-hmm.
I would be happy to explore it with someone further down the line when I'm ready for that. I've always been a top fister anyway. I've done that since my start 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But it can go so wrong if it's not done right. And that's where the connection is. You can't have someone who's completely rolling off their tits and not sending you the right signals at the time.
And the same thing, as with the sub, the dom needs to be trained as well. I mean, before I went to a lot of classes and worked with people who were experts at taking a fist, who worked with me of how to do this correctly and how to give a sub who can do this pleasure from that. Mm-hmm. Versus somebody who thinks fisting is, oh, I just stick my fist in, I just punch it out. That's yet another category of the play.
Absolutely, and it's
education on both sides. It's education on both sides. When I take on somebody new, forgetting even about fisting, but just any kind of ass play, that I actually buy them something. If we're in that place where you're going to be a boy to me, even if you're not a local boy, I have a set of plugs that I get them from Mr. S, that I have a training schedule that I give them. And I tell them, this is how you're doing it. And I want you to give me your diary of which one, how long, all of that, to say when I'm going to take you to the next one. And those boys that have followed that have had success with it. And we've slowly moved them up to the point of then saying, well, how many fingers? And that's it. It's part of a process.
I think especially when you like talking to people who are in recovery, and the notion you get is because of drugs and your sense of sensibility kind of goes out the window. You get very greedy, and I'm definitely one of those people when I've been in a bad place. Not to say that at some stage it probably I've had fun with it. It wasn't all bad. I'm not going to pretend that none of it was, everything was horrible. It wasn't. I had very good sessions on drugs, but it's definitely like when you end the session and you almost can't sit for 3 days because you've gone too far. too fast. I have been in situations where the person I was with got impatient and forced it. And that's not good practice. And that definitely also ended the session very quickly.
Sure.
Because the impatience when you're high as well.
No, absolutely. At MAL, I belong to a group that is a hot ash and prolapse group, and we had an off-site fisting cigar party, and there was somebody in there. I mean, hot as anything. His partner tried to fist him, and he kind of scratched him. He hadn't taken care of his nails, and I just said, but I could see he really wanted to be fisted, and I talked to him. And I started, and he said, "Sir, you are comfortable, but where he scratched me is really hurting." And I'm like, "We're done." But you see, that's the kind of communication you need to have, especially if you're at a party and you're, shall we say, the piñata of the party. So if you're going to have so many, if you might have 2, 3, 4 fists, at a certain point, not everybody understands the grooming technique that needs to happen, and you need to be careful of that.
Yeah. I've been at parties, and it's not necessarily something I'm proud with. I've been to parties with a friend of mine who's also a puppy I initiated way back. I've been master, top, and so on, and I've initiated him into puppy play, and I took him to a party as a puppy, but I got very, 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 very drunk. And it ended in tears, literally, because I wasn't reading his signals. He got more frustrated with me, and he literally started barking at me because I was not being a good master to him, because I was not all there. So it's so important to not completely lose your sensibility and kind of be able to read the boy or the sub or the puppy, because it's not good play anyway.
I agree. And, I guess the reason, when I have 3, was introduced as ChiefDaddyMaster, because I do have a boy and I do have a slave. And I used to be the chief of the Mid-Atlantic Uniform League. But
that explains
Daddy, honestly, under all of that, Daddy really runs deep for me. And whether we're going to play at a party because we've met eyes and we want to play, or you're somebody that I have an ongoing play relationship with, or you're my boy, I take very seriously my responsibility of caring about you and as I said, reading the signs. And quite frankly, if it's somebody who I don't know, I give them the traffic signal safe code word, because I don't know you. I don't know how to read your signals yet. And if they say, "Well, I don't need that," I said, "I do." So you'll use them.
Yeah, and it's so important. And you talked about fantasy and reality are 2 very different things. One big thing for me, especially when I was still using, was the whole fantasy around, what if we did this and this and this? And it was just like more and more and more and more and more out there stuff. And it's about just kind of just taking it back a little bit. Look at it. It's like, how do you actually feel about it? In early recovery, maybe like the first 6 months, I had a session with this very beautiful muscle skinhead, like taken out of a porn film. But because he didn't know me and he didn't know my backstory or respected some of my boundaries, it made me feel uncomfortable for like maybe 3 days after. It just fucked with my head. And it was not a nice feeling, because it's like, that was not what I wanted. I was really into it at the time. I was almost so into it, I was hyperventilating, and I had to take breaks because I was just excited because it's been so long. But it fucked with my head so much that I spent 3 days after recovering from it. And that's not good practice.
No, it really isn't. And I know people who, will move away from fisting to the pain level. I've got a very good friend who goes to Inferno, and he can really take it. I'll have to share this with you, a picture of his ass on the 4th day after Inferno.
I could show you a picture of my ex. He's
So
it goes from black to
again,
purple.
once again, let's remember, without turning it into something completely boring, people may have medical histories. People may have certain issues. A friend of mine just recovered from a blood clot. You kind of need to know, how far can you go? And they need to know. They need to be able to tell you how far you can go. And I know we're kind of repeating ourselves a bit with this, but this is my.
It is worth repeating. That's the thing.
This is really it. The other part of it now. Let's go back to the fantasy. Is for the people who I'm playing with. I want to be your aphrodisiac. I want that your desire to serve me is the thing that opens up your hole. That lets you take, a couple of more slaps of the spanker, or a couple of more hits from the single tail, or one, because I want to try to see if we can build that energy circle of your pleasing of me, making me want to please you, and that energy is what makes the play hot.
Yeah, and
without a third party in it.
With that type of connection, I've talked to subs before where I'm just like, I'm gonna make your ass red, but you're gonna enjoy it, and they're like, oh, I'm not that much into pain. It's like, well, I'm not gonna just start beating you. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. You slowly build it up. You want to engage with the head. You want the head to follow with you, mm-hmm. and make them crave it to please you, and that's in itself can be a natural, very natural high. There's nothing better when you've served someone and you kind of afterwards you do the recovery mode of it, and it's that sense of accomplishment you get.
I had a scene at IML a few years ago with somebody that just the way the energy went, it almost was afterwards, after the aftercare, we went down and we ate like pigs because we were both so satisfied, and neither of us came.
Oh yeah.
We didn't need the actual orgasm to satisfy us because we were able to reach that plateau. And I'm like, I'm famished. Why am I famished? And it was like, wow, this is really good. Well, and so I could see why people get on crack.
Well, I don't know if this is what my experience, especially becoming sober. I spent so many years going home from all sorts of places with all sorts of guys, never coming because you can't fucking come on drugs.
Right.
And so now it's not that important to me. It never has been important to me. As either bottom or top, I don't necessarily have to come. I enjoy if someone else comes, mm-hmm. but for me, that's more enjoyable. It's mm-hmm. not a priority for me to come.
No, my boy is the same way. I mean, my boy is more disappointed if I don't come than if he doesn't come. And he's like, and he said, I remember the first time because it was a bit weird, and he just said to me, Daddy, I came by making you come.
Yeah, I exactly get that feeling. I've had people fuck me, and when they've come, I'm just like, I'm actually fine now. I'm perfectly fine. And they're completely baffled by it. It's like, are you sure? I would want something now if it was me. I was like, no, I'm perfectly fine. I don't need mm-hmm. any more than that.
I also think, again, being a bit older and having some health issues back in my 40s, the genetic issue was discovered because I kept, within 2 years, I hit 4 blood clots.
Right.
And that has affected sometimes my performance about fucking. So even though I might fuck somebody or we might have a session, you'll get fucked about 5 times for about 8 minutes apiece. And you have to have somebody that you can communicate about that with and find the ways of satisfaction that don't equate to those type of thing to coming or basically the things that we all kind of thought about in a porn fantasy or when we were 21.
Well, it's you say medical. It's for me. It's because I have I suffer with anxiety and mild depression, so I take anti-anxiety medication, which affects your libido. It
Sure.
affects you how you can come, stuff like that. I'm very honest about it, but it does mean my sex drive very comes in waves, and it's much more. I'm much more into a connection, having a connection with a person than full-blown fucking from the start. That's just not. That's one of the things with the medication. Is just I'm much more into socializing and then engaging in some play and see where it goes instead of anonymous hookups.
I have really grown out of the anonymous hookups. For a few reasons. One is the inconsistency of them. You've worked, and then like 20 minutes, all of that. It's like, okay, what, kids, I don't have the time for that. Two, just it's too much work.
It is. Yeah, spending time on those apps or wherever you find people, and it just it's a lot of work.
Right, and for me, being freaking greedy, I have a slave and I've got a boy who are available to me. Which has made me a very, very rich person during COVID, because I know people who don't have that and are just about to blow their minds off.
I live on my own. London has been the hardest hit city in Europe, so it's been I'm tentatively starting to socialize again, but it's very you kind of start thinking about stuff or you can't actually start kissing someone randomly because you might catch it from this person, and so that's a bit of. And I have to be careful. I'm an asthmatic. I don't want to get it, to be honest.
And those are the kinds of things that you really have to think about. Nor do you want to be responsible for someone else who you don't understand what their health considerations are. Like, one of the things that turns out, I have a friend who works at the CDC. If you're diabetic, you're at a very high risk to contract it. And I don't want to be responsible for that. But you're right. I have also found we're having next weekend, if the weather holds, because we have 2 acres of land here, we're having a social distancing cocktail, which will be basically soda, because you can't drive in New Jersey with a drink.
Of course, you can't anywhere.
Right. And cigar thing where the chairs are placed within 6 feet distance, but these are all friends of ours, and it's like, we're blessed to have that land. Why don't we all come together and visit with each other and do this? So I think the thing that you learn, both being plain and sober, being older, all of the various factors, is you take BDSM, I think, is a very creative. It's something creative. We have it because we didn't want to have the same old that vanilla sex can offer sometimes.
What's that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah. and it's there. It can definitely be there, and you can mix it, especially if you can mix both of them. It could be wonderful. But part of it is your creativity of the scenes, because if not, it's just throwing a flogger against something. I could throw it against the back, I could throw it against the wall. You have to make something creative about it. For myself, with my slave, he's a football fan, and we were watching. I was not, but every time his team made a play, another finger went up his ass. Especially since his team was playing against the team of my city. So, it would be, you take all of that and you just try to be creative. And
you can be creative, you can be a bit silly, I think sometimes some people take it a little bit too serious. There should also be a percentage of fun, a little bit of play, a little bit of cheek.
I told him today, he wanted to watch this. Back in the 40s, the movies had these, basically like Superman serials, different chapters. So we watched one, Terry and the Pirates. It's absolutely horrid. But I told him, we put a TV down in the playroom for porn. I said, I could put that on and you could decide which one you're going to have, the single tail or watch this. and sometimes that's the whole thing, is that by playing clean and sober, to come back to the subject, it allows your head to be inventive on the spot, and that it allows you and your partner to hopefully ride that together. How am I doing this? The step by step, or what if we take a turn because, well, as we just discussed, sometimes the physical issues, maybe something doesn't work out. So how do we work that out? How do we work that out to still have fun and have a good time? Because what we planned, maybe that didn't work out. So how do we still have fun? And you can only, I'm sorry, I think you can only do that clear-headed.
Absolutely. And there's definitely situations where I've been in where it was very questionable what some of the stuff I got up to, because I was just not compass mentis. If I could tell you I'd never been raped on drugs, I wouldn't be able to tell you, because there's probably quite a few bits that was done without consent, and that's scary. That is scary to me, but I have no recollection of it, so I can't really say I claim trauma of it. It's just something in my past, and it probably did happen.
And I understand that. I was put in a situation as a child where I needed to be in control all the time, from the time I was 8 years old. So if somebody was to ask me, what is my biggest fetish? It's being in control. And I won't put myself in a situation with people I don't know where I will not be in control. Now, that being said, I've been, when I started out in leather, I was a boy. I even tried my turn at being a slave. That failed miserably. But I was a good boy. I learned from several people. I learned what to do, what not to do, because I kept my eyes and ears open till the point where I was comfortable enough to take on the dom role. And but to learn that, you have to be present.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I used to be a puppy to two sirs, or mommy and daddy, as I call them now, but I'm still very good friends with them. One is a rubber guy, one is a leather guy, and I used to be their puppy. And one of the things they always installed in me was, it's like, the way we take care of you, take care of the next one. That is what you need to put forward. I've been even high. I've been in saunas where I've seen someone in trouble, and all their friends have disappeared, but I'll pick them up, cool them down, make sure they're breathing properly, And that has always been installed in me. If I see someone struggling, someone slightly younger than me, not as much experience, I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to advise. But that's, of course, only my experience. I don't talk for everyone. And that I still have loads of things I could learn. And I'm still relearning a lot of things as well. But I know what my experience is.
If anybody says in this world that they're the expert, that they've got the entire book down, that's the time. That should be your time to say, that's wonderful, and go the other way.
Yes.
I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
because I almost look at this, funny enough, I look at this like a superstore. Yeah, there's aisles and aisles and aisles and aisles of things. And then in that aisle, let's take Impact Play. There's different brands of that. And you can't say that brand A and brand B are the same.
No.
You know, and also how that person uses brand A and brand B. So to say, oh, well, this is the one true way, I'm like, maybe not. And especially considering I have both my boy is 52, my slave is 66. I tend to prefer older boys and slaves because the thing that turns me on the most is having a capable, knowledgeable man who still says, I want to give over to you. I want to be submissive to you. And I'm always accept that submission with instilling in them, even the slave, they still have their own power. They're still able to say to me, sir, yellow, timeout, something's not working. Because I can't say that I want this person without giving them their voice. And one of the things that I think I see a little bit, addiction it's such a big subject. I don't want to get into that, but I see a lot of younger men who are walking into this and they accept that this is the way it needs to be, even when it's not safe for them, and thinking that they don't have a voice. And for myself as a sir, I want every sub that I play with to know that this is a safe place to have a voice if something's not working. And that is different than you directing the scene. But you have a voice if you are uncomfortable.
Yeah, I've talked to boys online where we've gotten into like, oh, I want to do this, and we kind of go through the whole scenario they want to play out, and then we come to maybe the chemsex bit of it, and I realize actually there's an issue here, and I'm happy to turn it from, no, we're not playing, but here is my experience. This is where you can go to get help, and I'll happily support you, but it will be a non-sexual way, because that's not what the person needs. Especially here in London or Europe, chemsex is such a big issue. It's a huge, big issue. So for me, it's very important, especially when younger guys do contact me on the different apps, kind of going, I don't know how to get out of this. And I was like, okay, this is my experience. This is what I've done. It's not necessarily going to work for you, but try these things and see how you feel. And sex is a big part of that. How do you practice fetish sex or sex in general without the drugs when you've gotten so used to them? They're intertwined with it. That was my biggest problem when I started trying to stop, was my sex drive was connected to my cravings for chems or drugs. So I had to literally step back from fetish for like almost 2 years to rediscover how I feel in my fetish gear, because there was so much anxiety around it. Just like the smell of rubber at one point could trigger me. And that's an awful feeling because it's something I love. I love fetish. I love the masculinity of it. I love how it makes me feel when I wear it. But when you feel like it's your Achilles heel, it's an awful feeling.
Absolutely. And, you know, there are times that you have to, I guess you have to retrain yourself.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm going to go back to a bit of a personal thing. You know, I did tell you that, you know, I come from a background of addiction. Both my mother and my brother are schizophrenic, and they use various forms of medication, you know, to help with whatever, you know, before they were diagnosed.
Yeah.
And understanding that I had a childhood based on that, I was always aware that that could be passing on to me. And at one point, I actually think I was starting to get in trouble with alcohol. I think I was at a job I hated. I was at a bar, and I found myself twirling my cocktail napkin into my 7th margarita. And I'm like, okay now. And I was also going through breaking up a bad relationship. It was just things were coming. And I finally said, you know what? Fuck this. And this is just me. What works for me does not going to work for everybody else. But I said, you know what? We're going to tear it down and we're going to build it back up. And for myself, I stopped drinking. I didn't have anything for about 4 years. I didn't, I quit school for about 6 months, put myself into therapy, and I cut off my family and I started to build who I was. And also for a little while, I had to cut off fetish play too, because, you know, again, I was a bottom, that I found certain play triggered my childhood. And I was scared for a while that as a bottom, it would trigger, and that my actually beating something might trigger me wanting to beat something. And so I tippy-toed back into it before I was comfortable. In fact, I did something about 3 years ago. I have a very good friend who is an expert with single tail. And knowing I was wanting to get back into it, I wanted to prove to my boys that I understood how it felt, since it had been many years. I asked my friend to single tail me. And I told him, you know, where we were going and what I was doing. And after the session, I sent pictures to the boys, but I said, even more so, you did much more for me, because I could play that way. I could take it, and it didn't trigger anything from my childhood.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm clean to play this way. And
yeah, it's especially when I talk to fetish people who are in early recovery, it's a very delicate period, especially the first year. It's always very delicate, and I try to be as honest with them as possible that there is a risk you might have to step back from this for a while to relearn a couple of things. I think sex is very important, but when you're drug taking and so integrated into your sex drive, it's very difficult to balance these things and make sure that it's safe. But that's where talking to someone who's might been through it, or you can go to 12-step meetings or smart recovery, whatever works for you. And I get very jealous of what you have in the States when it comes to like fetish recovery. It's such a big thing over there. You have lore, you have meetings at IML, and it just seems like there's such a big community of sober, proud fetish men in the States compared to here. But then again, the chemsex scene here is relatively new. It's only maybe like 5-6 years it's really came on the radar of being an issue. So it's I get very jealous when I talk to some of the people of my group on RealClearFetish, where it is like, oh, I'm going to the meeting in full leather. I was like, oh, you can do that? Great. I was like, if I do that in my meetings, oh my God, I'll trigger half the people in there. That's not going to work.
Right. And it just comes into that beginning stages of of everything else, you know, I guess I think of it as this way, and I'm glad I explained this, is that I've allowed you know, at one point, because again of the childhood issues, I let sex use me. I didn't use sex.
Yeah.
And I found very early on sex was a way to get attention. Instead, it being something pleasurable and having a connection and all of this stuff. And taking those couple of years away from certain things and then building it back was I chose. And that's the thing that, again, you know, I think we're coming from the same perspective, is learning that how to, instead of letting things choose for us, we're choosing it. We're taking back our power and choosing what we want versus allowing history, chem, or whatever choose for us. And I guess that's my big encouragement to whether people are having a chem issue or an alcohol issue or just an esteem issue.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people who are coming into this community who are coming in to find esteem, that of promoting your own individual power. And you choose. And it's okay, even if there was ever if I ever heard a dom say, no, you're a slave, you're a boy, you don't have the right, I swear I'd punch him out.
Yeah, it's most slaves have, it's like this notion of totality, that they have nothing to say and they just have to say yes sir and no sir and how high sir.
Yeah.
That just screams bad master in my ears.
No. And I'm been becoming very involved with, and we're thinking about here in the States, when this, you know, I used to live in Las Vegas, and all the casinos had this pamphlet that said, when the fun stops, when does it become from gambling, from playing to an addiction? Well, the same thing in our lifestyle is, when does it go from being play to being abuse?
Yeah, it's a very, very fine line.
And as our lifestyle has become more popular, there are a lot of people who are coming into it that, you know, they would have a problem in any lifestyle, but they're coming into it because it's easier to hide behind.
I definitely, like, I've had people tell me, I'm very much an introvert. It's something I've very much discovered as a sober person. I like my own company. I'm not good with big crowds and so on. But I have had people tell me, as soon as I put my lever on, my posture changes, my attitude changes, my confidence changes. It is my armor. It is something I can kind of, well, as you say, hide a little bit behind. But it's just heightening something that's inside me, which is just a bit difficult when you're wearing cotton. For me,
well, it's the same thing as a suit.
Absolutely. You know, I love wearing a suit. I look very smart in a suit.
In fact, I completed my MBA in October, and I wore under my graduation gown I wore my leather uniform. I wore boots.
Fantastic.
And I actually have a picture of me outside the gown, but having the cap on in full leather. And having
Fantastic.
pictures taken in front of all these people who came from all over, seeing me in full leather, because I did this for me. This is my authentic self. And I won't allow that. I won't allow anybody else to tell me when or when not to be my authentic self in my own private whatever. Obviously, there have been times I've definitely wanted to go to the office in full leather because some of my employees could sure use it. And I definitely have worked with coworkers or clients who I'm like, if I only had my flogger.
You probably get HR on you right away.
Of course it would, but I'm just like,
but you really
damn, you could use a good spanking. But so we all have our face, and at the same time, we can use that. We could use it. If you were a child with scoliosis, that you had this back brace to help you, we could use it as our back brace till we build our confidence. That I still feel like the daddy, the sir, the dom. I can be in cargo shorts and a t-shirt and sneakers.
Yeah.
This does not make me the dom. And
it just heightens it, I guess.
Yes, no, I agree. And I'm just saying, but I think that's also something that helps. If it helps you with that control, it helps you with your esteem, because I can carry the memories of what wearing this feels like into that t-shirt and cargo shorts, or into a certain situation.
Absolutely.
And that I'm currently in the middle of a job hunt, and in my interviews, I pretend I'm wearing full leather to help give me the confidence to do those interviews and not feel on an equal level.
I might use that in my next interview. That might actually work.
No, it really is. And and again, taking the power of, I had a interview where I was supposed to meet a team, and only myself and the person who first interviewed me were on the video call. And I said, I thought we were having a video. Well, they choose not to. And I said, you're telling me a lot about the team then. And no shit, I didn't get the job, but I felt like, if we're having this, why not?
Yeah, it's. I'm mindful of the time. Is there any, like, you live in Washington DC, right?
I split my time between Washington DC and New Jersey, but I do have to mention this comment that somebody said that we've just encouraged them to do the same thing, but only at their performance review.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But I know, like, the big events, MAL. I should really know the names now.
That's in DC.
How would you navigate or tell someone who goes into, like, that type of situation, and there's probably going to be chemsex at such a place? Do you have any advice on how you should navigate that? Should you go with someone who's been before, stuff like that? Just to round it off.
I would recommend them doing it as if they were a newbie.
Sorry, say again?
I would recommend that they go to these things as if they were completely new to leather. This is their first. You may have gone to leather events before. Consider this your first leather event. And yes, go with your friends who are sober. Make sure you've got them around you. Because, of course, events, and I'm sure the same thing at Folsom Berlin and at London events, there's always booze. I mean, it's one of the ways they make money, let's face it.
Yeah.
So let's just go away from drugs for a second. There's alcohol.
Yeah.
So And there's tables and tables and tables and tables to buy tickets for alcohol and things like that. And be there with somebody, at least your first time, and get through a couple of events with your friends. And then, okay, try and judge yourself to say, I'm ready that I can go to that table and only get a soft drink ticket.
Yeah,
And
it's so important.
I can go to this party and understanding I can't control what other people do. I can control what I do. And I think that's really, and in fact, you can walk around me, Slave, I think that's the same thing. I kind of take, again, the daddy piece. It's like riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
Put on the training wheels. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you're ready, say, I'd like to try this myself. And then why don't we even come up to agree, let's talk in an hour and see how you do it.
Absolutely. It's such, I've been in situations where I've gone to clubs or parties where I have people I can check in with just to make sure. I think my first big event in London, the biggest trigger was standing in the queue for the toilets, because I knew what I would normally do in those cubicles. I would be snorting something. And that was a big trigger point for me, but I could just grab one of my friends and go, I'm feeling a bit unsure, I'm a bit shaken. Can we just have a pause and just talk about it? And that's so important. It's so important to have a security net.
I agree. Remember we were discussing earlier about when we were talking about fisting, people trying to force it in.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing here.
Yeah.
Don't force it in. You can have, we talk about in the leather community, and I'll throw that big term out, but the leather community is little villages, and they're the little villages of your mates, of your leather family, of people who respect you, and all of that. And use that.
Absolutely.
They're there for you. They're there for you. They care about you. And if you're new to this and you don't have anything, or you're new to this, and I know that some people that maybe while they were using may have burnt some bridges.
Yeah.
Look either for new people you can be honest with, or people who have forgiven you, and say, I need your support.
Yeah.
And reach out. Most importantly, reach out. Say
Absolutely.
what you need. Say what you need, because we can't be there for you if we don't know. Because at the same time, we don't want to ruin someone's fun, and we don't want to be hovering and all of those other things. What do you need? What do you need from me? And I can give that to you.
Brilliant. I want to say thank you very much for coming and doing this with me. It's been so educational. There's so much knowledge. I'm sure we could talk for 2-3 hours more, but
I'm literally
being reminded now that we are running out of time.
Not a problem. I look forward to
thank
meeting
you so much for doing this. It's been an honor to talk with you.
I look forward to meeting you, as well as the other members of the group, once we can all meet again.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you very much for joining in, Daddy. That's been great to talk to you.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye. So this was the first episode of RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay. Thank you for watching. ChiefDaddyMaster was a joy to have on, and thank you very much for making this a very, very good first episode with some very interesting discussions about what sober sex is for you. If you are struggling with chemsex, drop me a private message. I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to advise, or any other members, or join my group on Facebook on the RealClearFetish. And I'll see you next week, same time, where we will be talking with a local from London. Thank you. Keep it safe and play clear-headed.